welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski, and we have a very action-packed show for you today. PFL is back, like I said last week, so I'll be going over a little bit of that, basically going over who made the playoffs, who is still in it, as we still have one more fight in the lightweight division that could decide whether one person makes the playoffs or whether one person does not make the playoffs. We also have UFC Fight Night, Kattar versus Emmett. I will be reacting to that amazing fight card. This was action-packed, 9 finishes in the entire fight card, 8 of them knockouts, a very exciting night. And also I will be reacting to next week's Fight Night on June 25th. But first off, I'll be starting off, like I said, with PFL. It was a very exciting night. 7 fighters were able to clinch a playoff spot. All 4 of the light heavyweight spots have been filled. 3 of the lightweight spots have been filled. Still waiting for one more fight between Anthony Pettis and Stevie Ray that will decide who gets that 4th and final spot. For the light heavyweights, all of the top 4 won their second fight. Robert Wilkinson will be the number 1 seed, it looks like. It looks like he got the tiebreaker over Omari Akhmedov. Robert Wilkinson got a first-round TKO victory over Victor Pesta and a second-round win back at PFL 1 over Bruce Soto. So I think he just had less accumulated time compared to Omari Akhmedov, who, like I said, also had 11 points after his second-round submission over Oxtolis, and he also had a first-round knockout over Victor Pesta. As for the number 3 seed, that will be Antonio Carlos Jr., the reigning champ of the light heavyweight division. He was able to get 9 points with his last fight being a decision victory over Bruce Soto, with his first fight being a first-round finish over Dylan Monte, who will be your 4 seed after getting the first-round knockout over Emiliano Sordi. He actually tied with Josh Silveira, but he was able to get the finish in a quicker time, so he owns the tiebreaker. So the semifinals will be Robert Wilkinson versus Dylan Monte, and then Omari Akhmedov versus Antonio Carlos Jr. Should be very exciting. Now with the lightweights, we still, like I said, we still have one playoff spot open, as Anthony Pettis and Stevie Ray will be fighting in a couple weeks. But Anthony Pettis has already guaranteed his spot in the playoffs. He got 6 points with a first-round finish in his first fight. So he is guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. But Olivier Aubin-Mercier was also able to get 2 decision victories, so he will also be in the playoffs. And same with Alexander Martinez, who also got 2 decision victories. But basically, that last spot comes down to whether Stevie Ray can finish Anthony Pettis quicker than Rosh Manfio, the reigning lightweight champ, was able to finish his first fight. He got a 3rd-round finish. I can't remember the time off the top of my head, but if Stevie Ray finishes Anthony Pettis before Rosh Manfio won his fight, then we will see Stevie Ray in. If not, Rosh Manfio will be in. And then I think there's also going to be some seeding discussion. I'm not sure if Anthony Pettis, if he loses, if he will be knocked down in the seeding with his first-round finish, or if that will actually get him the number 1 seed. So it's really just a lot of seeding going on with the lightweight division, and then the number 4 seed that still has to be decided. But that is all we we really have for PFL. So let's dive into the absolutely fantastic UFC Fight Night Kattar versus Emmett. We are coming off two of the best fight cards of the year with UFC 275. Now, this fight night, it was absolutely amazing. Like I said in the beginning of the show, we had 8 knockouts. We had 9 finishes out of the 13 fights. One thing that did suck is we did lose our co-main event day of. Donald Cerrone and Joe Lozon got canceled again and again on the day of this fight. So that was kind of lame, but nonetheless, everything else made up for it because this fight card was absolutely amazing. Starting off strong with Roman Dolidze versus Kyle Dawkins. This was the first of many stoppages that happened on this card, plus the first of many quick stoppages. First round, we saw a lot of first round finish. I want to say there were 6 first round finishes on this card, close to a UFC record for first round finishes on one card. Roman Dolidze definitely came to play in this fight. I thought he would go more for the grappling, which I thought would be his downfall in this fight, was Kyle Dawkins being the superior grappler. But he ended up using his striking a lot more, which was obviously a huge edge for him. And then to finish it off, he hit him with that nasty knee from almost behind him in the clinch. It was crazy. I've never seen a knockout like that before, where he kind of came around his body, kneed him in the head, got him on the ground, and then was able to get the TKO victory. So that was the first of many, many exciting fights, followed up by Phil Hawes versus Darren Wynn. This was an absolute domination for Phil Hawes. It seemed like he landed almost everything he through, which, I mean, he did land at a very, very high rate, just hitting him with slicing elbows, brutal jabs. He was able to keep the wrestler in Darren Wynn, the much shorter fighter in Darren Wynn, at a distance to where he couldn't get in close, he couldn't get his takedowns. He didn't even attempt a takedown in this entire fight. Finally, at the end of it, I honestly think Herb Dean probably could have stopped this a lot sooner than he did, but eventually Herb Dean did step in. Darren Wynn even tried to argue it, but I mean, he was just getting destroyed in this fight. He wasn't going to last much longer, regardless if Herb Dean stepped in at that point anyways. But absolutely phenomenal performance. Complete domination for Phil Hawes. This might have been his best showing. He did get into it a little bit with Daniel Cormier, who is training partners with Darren Wynn after the fight, but later apologized. It was really no big deal. It was kind of weird, though, that Phil Hawes just called Daniel Cormier out of nowhere, basically. But nonetheless, it was a great performance by him. He can kind of do whatever he wants after that type of performance. Next up, Eddie Wineland, who actually just announced his retirement yesterday after his loss to Cody Stamann. This fight was only a minute long, but the grappler was the one to actually land a majority of the strikes, get the super quick KO victory. I wish there was more to say. Really, the only other thing to say is how impressive it is that Cody Stamann landed 32 strikes in 59 seconds. Especially, like I said, he's a grappler. He's a great wrestler, but he didn't even have to use that in this fight. His hands were enough. He was able to defeat the legend Eddie Wineland. But congrats to Eddie Wineland on a fantastic career, and enjoy retirement for him. And then next up, we have Maria Oliveira versus Gloria De Paula. This fight was really fun to watch. Both ladies really put it out there on the line the entire fight. I'm fairly surprised they gave this fight to Oliveira. I mean, she threw over 300 strikes and she landed under 100 of them. So, I mean, she was at like 33% striking land rate. But I mean, when you do throw 300 strikes, you do appear to be a lot more active. like I said, very entertaining. Congrats to Oliveira for getting the win. But I kind of think DePaula won this fight. She was able to get a couple takedowns. She was able to land a higher rate of strikes. But nonetheless, I can see why they gave it to Maria Oliveira. Next up, Ricardo Ramos versus Danny Chavez. This looked like it was going to be a very, very entertaining fight, which it was, but it only lasted a little bit over a minute. So as entertaining as a minute-long fight could be, before Ricardo Ramos hit Danny Chavez with an absolutely brutal spinning back elbow, dropped Danny Chavez instantly. Chavez got hit so hard he didn't even know what happened. He tried to get back up and argue with the ref that he wasn't hurt, but he was clearly knocked out cold just a few seconds ago. So it was an awesome strike from Ricardo Ramos. Every time you see a spinning back elbow, it's always super fun to see. So huge props to Ricardo Ramos. Next up, again, there's a lot of these. Another really short fight. Court McGee versus Jeremiah Wells. This happened a minute and a half into the fight. And then Jeremiah Wells hit Court McGee with an absolutely brutal left hook. Had Court McGee knocked out cold, sleeping on his back on the mat. So huge power on display for Jeremiah Wells. But unfortunately, there's not a whole lot more to talk about with that fight. Next up, we have the second of the two women's bouts on this card. Jasmine Davisius versus Natalia Silva. And man, did Natalia Silva look absolutely dominant in this fight. She had great striking. She had the left kick. No matter if it was to the leg, to the body, or to the head, she seemed to land that every single time she threw it. She had great grappling. She had great ground and pound. She had great defense on striking and takedowns from Jasmine Davisius. She looked near perfect in this fight. Davisius couldn't get any momentum going. Silva was just too quick. She was moving laterally perfect to where Jasmine just couldn't get in a rhythm the entire fight. Silva looked almost near perfect in this fight. It was absolutely insane. And she's only 25 years old. She has so much time to be in the UFC, to grow as a fighter even more than she already has. So I cannot wait personally to see how her career takes off if she's performing like that in her debut at 25 years old. Next up, Adrian Yanez versus Tony Kelly. This fight was absolutely awesome to watch. I'm not going to lie. Mostly because I just don't like Tony Kelly. No one likes Tony Kelly. I've never met anyone that likes Tony Kelly. He sucks. But I know Adrian Yanez did not like him either, as we saw after Adrian Yanez basically dominated Tony Kelly for the 3.5 minutes this fight lasted. He ended up getting the knockout victory. He then told Tony Kelly he was number one with both hands, if you understand what I'm talking about, as that was kind of Tony's thing going in. He kept flipping everybody off at the weigh-ins. He was flipping off the crowd in Austin. He was flipping off the camera. I don't know what that is all about. I don't really know what he's doing. But Adrian Yanez, in the end, got the last laugh, got the win. And Adrian Yanez has looked absolutely fantastic since joining the UFC. Unbelievable. He is one of the best strikers in that division. Absolutely bright future ahead of him. I could definitely see a ranked fight coming in his in the near future for him. I think he deserves it, as he's been on a tear since joining the UFC. Next up, we have Julian Marquez versus Gregory Rodriguez. Good God, Gregory Rodriguez went absolutely nuts in this fight, landing bombs the entire fight. It seemed like Rodriguez had like 10 knockdowns in this fight. Props to Julian Marquez's chin because he was able to stay up and stay in the fight as long as he could. There was even some points where he was throwing back at Gregory Rodriguez and he was landing big strikes too. But eventually, those huge strikes from Rodriguez caught up. He was able to get the KO victory. But this was a really fun fight to watch. I'm seeing Julian Marquez posted afterwards an Instagram DM from some random guy talking about how mad he was, how much he was a bum because he lost him his parlay. We really need to stop doing that. These fighters are so much better than your average person. It's unbelievable. People don't understand the gap that is a professional MMA fighter, let alone a professional UFC fighter, versus just the average person who most likely that guy probably doesn't even practice MMA. But it's just a stupid thing. I hate seeing it. The next fight was honestly maybe one of the closest fights I've ever seen in terms of numbers. Dimitr Imagulov versus Guillaume Kutateladze. It was a very entertaining fight. Like I said, it was a very, very close fight. In the end, two of the judges gave it to Ismagulov, but honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if the judges gave it to Kutateladze. Because the numbers were insanely close. Ismagulov landed 3 more strikes. He landed 1 more significant strike. The fighters combined to go 1 for 13 on takedowns, with Kutateladze getting the only takedown out of 13 attempts between both fighters. Like I said, very, very close. Very, very, very entertaining. In the end, though, Ismagulov did impress 2 of the judges more and did get the decision victory. So, again, very entertaining. Next up, though, was Joaquin Buckley versus Albert Duraev. This fight was absolutely insane, especially on the side of Joaquin Buckley. Every time I see him fight, it amazes me how hard that guy can hit. He was also very good against the grappling of Duraev, which is obviously Duraev's strength. Duraev was only able to land 2 of 9 takedowns, which I thought Duraev would have way, way more success in. I actually had Duraev winning this fight. In the second round, though, Joaquin Buckley landed an absolutely brutal left hand right on the eye of Duraev that ended up being the end of the fight at the end of the second round, as Duraev's left eye was completely swollen shut. Doctors would not let him continue as he could not see out of his left eye, and Joaquin Buckley was able to get the win by doctor stoppage. So that was another fun fight. And then we have the co-main event, Tim Means versus Kevin Holland. If anybody said that they picked Kevin Holland by submission, they either got insanely lucky or they're a liar. No one should have picked Kevin Holland to win this fight by submission. I believe he only has one other fight in his career win by submission. It's really almost a weakness of Kevin Holland's, at least in the past that we've seen. Tim Means actually came out in that first round and he looked very impressive, but the longer the first round went on, the more comfortable Kevin Holland got in this fight. He was landing huge strikes on Tim Means to where Tim Means started to reach for takedowns, shoot for takedowns that were not there, that he had no setup for, and then he attempted one just like that. Kevin Holland was able to sink in the Darce choke and get a submission victory, which, like I said, we do not see Kevin Holland get submission victories very often. So that was really cool to see him get the win. It's always fun watching Kevin Holland fight. And then that leads to the main event of the evening, a fight with huge stakes in the featherweight division. And this, to close out the night of very close fights and very exciting fights, this one was exactly that also. I think the round that was really in question was round 2. In my opinion, and what I've seen from a lot of other people, I think that Josh Emmett obviously got rounds 1 and 3. Calvin Kattar obviously got rounds 4 and 5. I personally gave round 2 to Calvin Kattar. Obviously, that didn't work out in Calvin Kattar's favor as he lost the fight by split decision. But there was a bit of controversy. Judge Chris Lee is under a lot of fire right now because he actually gave round 4 to Josh Emmett, which was, without a doubt, Calvin Kattar's best round. Calvin Kattar absolutely won round 4. If he won any round in that fight, he won round 4. And for Judge Chris Lee to give round 4 to Josh Emmett, which was ultimately kind of the difference maker for giving Josh Emmett that fight, I think it's absolutely absurd. But if it was something to where 2 of the judges gave round 2 to Josh Emmett, I would have absolutely no problem. One of the judges did give round 2 to Josh Emmett, and I totally respected that. I think it could have gone either way, but to not give Josh Emmett round 4, or not to give Calvin Kattar round 4, is absolutely insane in my eyes. It wouldn't surprise me if the UFC gave Josh Emmett a title shot, but it also wouldn't shock me if they didn't. I think it's really... We're going to see... A lot of it's going to play out in the next month with the Yair Rodriguez-Brian Ortega fight, with the Volkanovski versus Holloway fight in a couple weeks. But that's really something we're going to have to wait and see for. But I wouldn't be totally surprised if they gave him the title shot, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. But overall, great performance by both fighters. And congrats to Josh Emmett for getting the split decision victory. But that is all I have for the UFC Fight Night, Josh Emmett versus Calvin Kattar. So let's move on to some Fight Night predictions. The first fight of the night, Vanesa Demopolos versus Ginyu Fry. This is a very intriguing matchup as Demopolos brings in a very, very good grappling attack where Fry is fairly well-rounded but has terrific takedown defense. So I could see her finding herself in the better positions. Both ladies coming off wins. Demopolos winning her UFC debut at UFC 270 versus Silvana Gomez-Juarez. Ginyu Fry struggled at first, dropping her first 2 UFC fights, but has since made up for it, rattling off 2 wins last year in 2021 against Gloria DePaula and Ashley Yoder. As I said, Fry does have tremendous takedown defense and is well-rounded. She can win on the feet or on the ground. I think that combination is going to work in her favor for this fight. I'm going Ginyu Fry by decision. And then next up we have Brian Kelleher versus Mario Batista. A fight in the always exciting bantamweight division between 2 well-rounded fighters. The much more experienced Brian Kelleher coming in off a loss to Umar Nurmagomedov. But let's be honest, almost everyone loses to guys with the last name Nurmagomedov. Something to look at in terms of Brian Kelleher is he's never lost 2 fights in a row. He's had a lot of up and down where he's won 2 fights and lost 1, or won 1, lost 1. But he's never, in his UFC career, lost 2 fights in a row. And like I said, he is coming off a loss. Mario Batista is kind of on a roll, though, right now. He's coming off wins in 3 of his last 4 fights, including his last fight earlier this year against Jay Perrin, where he won by decision. I do think Kelleher will be more inclined to try to get this fight on the ground, as Batista does land almost 50% of his strikes, but I think Batista will be able to keep the fight standing, as he has pretty good takedown defense, and I think he will get the decision victory. Then next up, we have J.P. Buys versus Cody Durden. Interesting fight between 2 grapplers that have not performed to the expectations since joining the UFC, with only 1 win by Cody Durden last year out of the 6 total fights between these guys. So these guys have struggled immensely since joining. Durden is definitely much more of a wrestler with a very slight submission attack, but nothing like JP's jiu-jitsu. Also, Durden's last 2 losses have come from fighters getting a submission while he was on top of them. So I think that makes me lean a lot more towards JP Buys in this fight, and that's who I'm going with by second round submission. Next up is Halian Paiva versus Sergey Nazarov. This is kind of a hard fight to pick because Paiva has such a good record. I mean, he's 21-4, and his only losses in the UFC, we're talking about against some of the best flyweights and bantamweights in the world. Sean O'Malley, a ranked bantamweight, Rogerio Bontorin, a top 10 flyweight, and Kai Kara France, who's fighting for the interim flyweight championship next month in July. So, I mean, and it's also like he's just not that aggressive. He has a lot of decision victories. He's very much a wait and have you come at him fight. And he also just has horrible striking defense. He absorbs over 5 strikes a minute. Nazarov, on the other hand, is a very, very aggressive grappler and has tremendous defense against strikes, defending almost 60% of the strikes thrown his way. Plus, to add to his aggressive grappling, he also has tremendous ground and pound. I honestly think Nazarov will have the upper hand in this fight with the aggressiveness. I think he'll be in the face of Paiva too much, and I have Nazarov getting a 3rd round TKO victory. Next up, we have a fight between Shailin Nordenbecke facing off against TJ Brown. A very intriguing fight here, as Shailin, who is only 28 years old, will be fighting in his 47th professional MMA bout, taking on the grappling submission specialist, TJ Brown. With all that experience that Shailin brings to the table, only 2 of those fights are in the UFC, though. He is coming off of his first win last November. TJ Brown started off rough, losing his first 2 bouts in the UFC, but has since bounced back and gotten 2 straight wins. I really do think TJ Brown is just the far more aggressive fighter, and honestly, a better fighter than Shailin. Shailin has horrible takedown defense. It should be fairly easy for TJ Brown to get to this fight to the ground where he wants it to be. I'm going TJ Brown by 2nd round submission. That leads to the featured prelim of the night, Carlos Ulberg versus Tafon Nchukwi. We really have, this is a heavy-hitting light heavyweight bout. These 2 are going to go toe-to-toe and just throw big strikes. Neither fighter is incredibly experienced, as neither has even cracked 10 professional MMA bouts. I feel this fight most likely won't go to decision. Like I said, both of these guys just throw caution to the wind and just throw a bunch of huge strikes. but I am leaning towards Nchukwi as he has the better experience against higher caliber fighters. He's faced Jamie Pickett. He's faced another light heavyweight that I am absolutely blanking on right now. But he does have two big matchups that he has in the past, where this is kind of Carlos Ulberg's first big matchup that he's had in his career. But in the end, I'm going Nchukwi, and I'm going very quick first round KO. And then that leads into the main card, Chris Curtis versus Rodolfo Vieira. This is the classic grappler versus striker matchup. Highly experienced striker Chris Curtis, who is coming off an absolutely insane 2021. He had 6 fights last year in 2021, 2 of them in the UFC, and he won all 6 of those fights. So very, very active last year. He then has since taken a few months off, which good for him. I think he's earned a few months to sit and rest, get ready for Vieira, who he will need to be prepared for because Vieira is a very, very good jiu-jitsu specialist. I mean, this guy's nickname is the Black Belt Hunter, which I don't know why, but it scares me a little bit. He's trying to bounce back, or he's coming off a bounce back win with his first loss of the year, or of his career. But he will definitely be trying to get this fight to the ground. He can end a fight on the ground in many, many ways. This guy is a high caliber jiu-jitsu artist. That won't be easy, though, as Chris Curtis has never been taken down in the UFC, and he has faced a talented grappler before. He's coming off a win against Brendan Allen, who is also a very, very good grappler. I think Chris Curtis keeps riding that momentum. I think this break was much needed for him. I'm going with Chris Curtis, and I'm saying another first round TKO. So back-to-back first rounders for this fight card. That leads up to Nate Maness versus Umar Nurmagomedov. This matchup is going to be absolutely crazy, as these two have combined for 1 loss in 29 combined fights between the two of them. Umar is undefeated at 14-0 and has looked absolutely unstoppable, just like his older cousin Khabib did when joining the UFC. But Nate Maness will be by far his toughest opponent to date. He has tremendous striking. Plus, he can beat you on the ground too. He has won his first 3 UFC bouts, or his first 3 UFC bouts. He's been in 3. He's won by decision, he's won by submission, and he's won by knockout. So he can really do it all, and this is a knockout standing up too. It's not like it was ground and pound. He's not a one-trick pony. He can really do it all. But honestly, until I see someone challenge Umar, I'm not picking against him. I got to go with Umar in this fight. I'm going Umar by second round submission. Next up, we have Thiago Moises versus Christos Gallegos. 2 experienced guys trying to get back on the winning side of things. But honestly, neither has had the easiest of roads since joining the UFC. I mean, some of the losses that these guys have gone through, they have losses. This is both of them. It's not like one of them has faced all these guys, so this is combined between the 2 of them. They have losses to Islam Makhachev, Arman Tsarukyan, who's the main event, Charles Oliveira, Damir Ismagulov, Beneil Dariush, Drakkar Klose. They have faced the best of the best in this division, so I mean, it's kind of hard to fault them for losing to those great fighters. But both of these guys are very talented grapplers. But I do side with Thiago Moises just a little bit more because he does have bigger wins. He has faced more of those fighters that I listed. Plus, he has wins against Michael Johnson. He has wins against Bobby Green, guys that have been around for a very long time. So I am going to go Moises, but I don't think either one of these guys will be able to finish the other. I'm going Moises by decision. That leads into the one and only heavyweight bout of the night, Josh Parisian versus Alain Baudot. Two very, very hard-hitting heavyweights that, again, this is kind of like the light heavyweight bout earlier. I do not see this going to the decision. Shoot, I don't even know if I see this going past the first round. That is how hard these guys hit. Both fighters are coming off losses and really have struggled since joining the UFC. But I think Baudot has just had a very, very tough going in his UFC bouts. His first 3 UFC bouts were against the 6th-ranked heavyweight right now, Tom Aspinall, Rodrigo Nascimento, who is no slouch, and neither is Parker Porter. Plus, I really think he's super hungry to get that first UFC win, and I think he does it on June 25th, Baudot by first round KO. That leads to the co-main event of the evening, Neil Magny versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. I am so excited for this fight. The ultra-durable veteran, the guy who is not afraid to face anyone, and he's living up to that name by taking this fight. Neil Magny takes on one of the best prospects, the undefeated Shavkat Rakhmonov. Really, both of these guys can do it all. They have great striking. They have great striking defense. They have great grappling. They have great grappling defense. Like I said, they can do it all. This will be the toughest test of Rakhmonov's career by far. This Neil Magny has faced the best of the best. He has faced 3 former champions of the welterweight division. And lightweight division, as this was when Rafael dos Anjos was up at welterweight, but he was a former lightweight champion, and countless others that were championship contenders. Carlos Condit, Robbie Lawler is one of the former champions. Johnny Hendricks, one of the former champions. This guy has faced the best of the best. Kelvin Gastelum, a former championship contender at middleweight. I do think that Shavkat is up to the test, though. I think he is the real deal. I think he's going to come in and keep that undefeated record, but it will be very, very hard for him to do so. I have him narrowing out a decision victory and remaining undefeated and beating his first real contender that he has ever faced. Now for your main event of the evening, Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. Now, for the main event, for the average casual as a lot of MMA fans like to say, UFC fan, this may not seem the best fight to be on a main event. Neither guy is in the top 10. Neither has a crazy amount of experience in the UFC. But let me tell you, these two are 2 of the best up-and-coming fighters in the UFC. These guys are going to be an absolute problem for years to come. Tsarukyan's only 25 years old. Gamrot, a little bit older, but 31. He's still got a lot of time to grow in this sport. Both guys lost their UFC debut, but since then, neither guy has lost. Gamrot rattling off 3 straight wins, where Tsarukyan is rattling off 5 straight wins, where his only loss was that debut versus Islam Makhachev, who is a top 5 lightweight contender. they are both incredible wrestlers. They're almost the same exact fighter, to be honest. Just absolutely smothering style. They also just have relentless ground and pound. They have decent submission games to go along with it too, but I don't see, unless it's they get put in a position where they can very easily get a submission, I don't really see this ending in a submission. This is going to be a great fight. I'm very excited to see where these two guys go. These guys are very evenly matched. But I do think Tsarukyan is a little bit more well-rounded. I think he's going to do better on the feet. If you watched his last fight against Joel Alvarez, which for one was one of the bloodiest fights I've ever seen, as Tsarukyan just unloaded a nasty elbow that just had Alvarez pouring blood. But I do think Tsarukyan is more active to go along with the well-roundedness. I'm going Arman Tsarukyan, and I'm going kind of early. I'm going a second round TKO. He's going to continue his win streak, extend it to 6, and maybe even crack a top 10 spot in the lightweight division. But that is all I have for you this week. Next week is going to be an incredibly busy show, as we have PFL, where we will find out, or we'll get the second fights between the featherweights and heavyweights, where we will find out the playoffs for both of those divisions. We also have Bellator 282, where the middleweight championship will be on the line. Plus, we have 2 bantamweight Grand Prix fights, so that will be very exciting. I'm also very excited for Bellator, because if you didn't see my story or my Twitter post, I will be going to Bellator 283, as it will be in my home state of Washington. So I'm very, very excited to see Bellator. I can't wait for July 22nd when I can actually go to that. Plus, of course, I will be giving my reaction to UFC Fight Night, Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot, and giving my predictions for UFC 276, which I will actually be down in Vegas for. I won't be there for the pay-per-view itself, but I will be down there for UFC X, the fan experience. So super, super pumped about that. Hoping to catch at least the weigh-ins for UFC 276. I've always wanted to kind of go to one of those. But very, very exciting things coming up next week. It's going to be a very busy show, probably a little longer than usual. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Feel free to DM me, comment on any of my videos. If you want my opinion on anything in the world of MMA, I can give you a quick comment on the video or in the DMs, or I can actually add it to part of my show if it's a little bit more of a longer response, and give you a quick shout out if you would like that. But until then, you can find me also on Squabo Says' YouTube channel Tuesdays at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. That's more of a general sports, NFL, MLB, NBA, anything like that. Tune into there. You can get all my sports opinions for that. And then until then, I will see you all next Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you all so much for listening.